Welcome back to Building and Growing Shopify Apps. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to create a Shopify app admin interface using Shopify CLI, Gadget, and Polaris. I'm going to walk you through step by step, show you how to use the Polaris component, and show you the most important concepts of hooking everything up using React. If you didn't watch the previous video, I encourage you to do so right now, and then let's jump right into it. So this is the admin interface we are going to build that allows us to define and create lists of tags that are then going to be used on the backend side. Let's start with initializing a new app using Shopify's CLI. Let's call our app TurboTags again and use Node. Now we just need to wait until Shopify CLI has finished and has installed all the dependencies. Now we can change into the newly created TurboTags folder and we install one more package, which is local SSL proxy. Okay, now let's add the new folder to our VS Code workspace so we can look at the directory structure. Here we need to make a couple of changes, so this will integrate with Gadget seamlessly. So you really need to look out in what subfolder the changes are made, because there are multiple files and they exist in different subfolders, and it's really important to choose the correct one. So the first is in web frontend package JSON, and here we will add local proxy to the def command like I do here. Also make sure to check out the links in the video description where you will find all the code snippets and up-to-date information. Next, in the same folder, let's open the white.config.js file. And we're going to replace the entire content by the Gadget version. Next, let's open the package.json on the top level and modify the def command. We're going to add an option called no update. Now it's time to install the Gadget client libraries. This is a two-step process where in the first step we are going to configure npm to include the Gadget registry. And then in the second step, we are going to install the actual project libraries. What is special about Gadget is that it provides us with a package that is specifically configured for our project. And this is why you see that the package has the project name in the name. And this is really nice because this means that all the autocompleters will recognize our backend configuration and will give us some code that actually makes sense for us. Now let's write some code. So in the front end, we are going to create an api.js file in which we are going to define the Gadget client. Now let's open the app.jsx file and replace the content with the Gadget version. We can see in line 12 that it needs a Shopify API key. So for this we can create an .env file in the main directory where we can specify our API key. And there is one more thing that we need to fix, which is in the main directory, we need to rename the shopify.web.toml to something else, for example, .backup, so it doesn't get used. And now with everything done, let's type yarn run dev in order to start the development server. So for some reason this did not work. Let's see what the error message is. And we can see that it could not resolve Shopify App Bridge. So let's add that package. So now with app-rich React installed, let's try to start the development server one more time. And indeed, it looks like it started successfully. Now we can view HTTPS localhost in the browser, and we see that indeed it does work. To continue, we need to change our app setup, where we are going to set the app URL to HTTPS localhost as well. This means that we can then test our app directly from the admin interface. And we see also from the admin interface this works, and we see an embedded Shopify app. What is really nice is that once we update and save files in the editor, this will also update in the browser. This means you don't need to reload the browser window all the time in order to see your changes. So now, without further ado, let's create our actual application interface. For this, I'm going to create a new file in the components folder called tagmanager.jsx. Here I'm creating a new default function, which is also called Tag Manager. Tag Manager has an app provider from Shopify's Polaris package, and app provider in turn has a frame which we need in order to show the different loading states that we might have. Now we're going to use Tag Manager inside app.jsx. So now first import it. And then put Tag Manager inside the Polaris provider. Once we save the file, we can see how the browser window updates and we see Tag Manager. Now let's add a loading state. This is going to be active while we fetch data and will give the user an indication that our app is actually loading data. Once we refresh the browser window, this actually becomes an animation. Now, in order to interact with the backend, let's import the Gadget API. Also from Gadget, we are going to use some hooks. One is the use action hook and the other one is use find many. Now, in order to access data on the Gadget backend, we need to give some permissions to do so. So inside roles and permissions, we go on allow tag and give the read, create and delete permission to the Shopify app users. We can then use the use find many hook in order to retrieve all allowed tags from the backend. Also, let's add some code that will actually display the loading state while fetching is active and will display the actual data once it is not fetching anymore. Now let's create a new component for the actual markup. This is what is shown when fetching is not active, which means when the application has loaded. Once we have defined this component, we can simply use it inside our Tag Manager component. Now let's bring in some more Polaris components that we are going to use in order to build our application interface. We start by building a new Polaris page component, which has a title. Inside the page, we create a layout, which gives us the option to structure the content. First, we're gonna create a section called annotated section, and this gives us the possibility to basically describe and give the user some hints what he can do in this respective section. Inside, we create a card, and cards are great ways to group things that belong together. And then inside the card, we create a form layout. And this gives us the ability to make our input components align neatly and also give them the right spacing. Finally, we use a stack in order to place our tags then horizontally. And last but not least, let's bring in the actual tag component. Once we are finished, we close everything and hit save. Voila, we have a nice looking Polaris interface. Next, let's create a text field that allows us to create new tags. For this, we are going to use the text field component, which has a label, which we are going to set to create new tag. We hit save and this updates once again. Next, we want to add a button that allows us to confirm the tag creation. For this, we can use the connected right property and simply add a button in there. Now let's bring in our actual tag data. This is already present in the data property of our actual page markup component. So we just need to use the map function in order to create individual tags from them. Note how we set the tag key to the tag ID and the content to the tag keyword. Once this is done, we just need to fill it in and hit reload. Next, let's define a way that lets us remove tags that we don't want anymore. For this, we use the use action hook and create a delete tag function. Use action is provided by Gadget, and you can see how this is then connected to api.allowedTag.delete. Then we create a callback, which is called whenever we want to remove a tag. And this callback calls our delete tag function that we defined in the line above. The ID of our tag is then passed to the delete tag function. And after the delete tag function is called, we want to call refresh. Actually, when I recorded this, I didn't notice there's a typo in line 31 and it should be refresh there, but it's a typo, and this will be fixed later in the tutorial. Now let's connect the remove tag function to the onRemove property of the tag component, and once we have done that, we should see a little X to the right of each tag. And once we save, well, we see it doesn't work. So the problem is we made a mistake in the definition of our callback, but we can fix it pretty quickly like so. And we can see it works now, and we have the remove buttons next to the right side of each tag component. Now let's wire up our text field so we can actually input text. For this, we are going to use the useState hook, which creates a state and a setter, and a callback that will then call the set tag field value once the text changes. Now let's connect this to our text box. For value, we set tag field value, and for the onChange property, we set the handle tag field change function. And actually, there is one thing missing, which is to import the useState hook from React. And we can see that we can now type text into our text box, but the add button does not work yet, so this will be next. For this, we are going to use the use action hook again, pretty similar to the way we created the remove tag methods. Next is also pretty identical, which is defining a use callback again to then call the create tag function from above, which then uses the data from the text field. Finally, let's fix the typo in line 31, so it says refresh, and see if this works. No, it does not. So let's open the browser console and see if we can find where the error is. So here it says tag field value called before initialization. So this means that we need to move up the definition of tag field value to a place that is before we actually use it inside the use callback. Now the only thing left for this to work is to connect the onClick property of the button to the onButtonClick callback. And we can then see then when we click the add button, a new tag is added. With this, we have finished our admin interface for our TurboTags app. Now we have built a fully functional admin interface using Gadget, Shopify CLI and Polaris. If you learned something today, leave me a like and subscribe to the channel.